This talk has a subtitle, A Trade-Off Story, for a reason, because that's really going to be the theme of what we're talking about this morning, is life is characterized by trade-offs, and this is going to help us emphasize that. The reason that I talk about this at all is there's a subset of programmers that really know the benefits of everything but the trade-offs of nothing. I really like Rich Hickey's quote here. This is obviously an exaggeration, but I will say earlier in my career, I was definitely prone to fanboyism and thinking whatever I had found was definitely the solution, and what somebody was selling me was all upside, no downside. This is the nature of anything new that we look at. We look at it and we go, this is it. Like, this looks amazing, but you don't know the problems until you've gotten into the weeds for a while. And this talk is going to be a reminder of some of those things. So what I want to do today, we're going to talk about 10 software laws, although I may cut that shorter. When I say software laws, what I mean are basically maxims that spotlight different trade-offs in software. And at its core, when somebody hires you as a software developer, they're saying, you are going to be hired for your judgment, ultimately. Yes, we're paid to write code, but we're also just really paid for our professional judgment. So if I were to have to pick just one law out of this talk, this is it. And this law comes to mind all the time in my life, is the first law of ecology, which says that you can never change just one thing. And this is on my mind all the time. So I'm somebody that loves to speak at conferences. And like next week, I'll be gone for about a week, traveling to a conference, and that's a week that I don't get to spend with my family. It's a week I don't spend with my kids. And if you think about trade-offs that happen there, your career gets a little bit better and your relationship with your family gets a little bit worse, and there is nothing you can do about it. You've got a hard decision to make every day about these things. So also in software, the same thing happens. We have to ask ourselves, when I am doing this thing, is it truly just this one thing? It's almost never just this one thing. Even simple ideas to say we should have source control. And now that we have source control, now we have backups, now we have branches, but we can't just change one thing. There are other implications of us choosing to do that. So another example of this comes from my personal life. So if you rewind back to 2010, I had never spoken at a conference, and that was precisely why I decided to try it. I was very intimidated by the idea of public speaking, so I submitted to a conference, and I didn't actually expect to get in, but I did. And this was back in my hometown of Kansas City. So at the time, this was a free event, and Kansas City repping, there we go. We should be friends, there we go, nice. So I don't ever expect a woo for Kansas City, honestly, but yeah, I'll take it. The barbecue is good. But nonetheless, I made the decision at that point that I was going to chase my fear and just try to get better at it. And you fast forward, like here we are 15 years later, I have spoken literally hundreds of times at this point. It became the thing that I was intimidated by to the thing that is just feels like I feel really comfortable doing it now in a way that, like, I kid you not, I can get up here and speak now and I'm as comfortable doing this as I would be having coffee with you one-on-one. It just feels like something that I've gotten over that. And the very nature of life is that if something's hard, it's a pretty good idea to do it more often. This is when you play sports. Yes, you do reps, you do it again and again, you do drills and that sort of thing. And this also applies in software development. You know, there are times that you pick up a new technology, you are interested in this new framework, you know that there are algorithms that you struggle with, and you do the repetitions, you try it. This is also where, I mean, I spent so much time early in my career, nights and weekends, just fiddling with stuff, building in tech where I didn't have to, but I could afford to make mistakes. I could afford to screw it up, and I could basically get that scar tissue in a safer way. So after doing all these sorts of things, this is wild. Like, this was just a few years after I started speaking. I found myself, this is in San Francisco at a conference that no longer exists. This was thrown by O'Reilly called Fluent Conference. And you can't see it here, but this was just like a moment where I just got chills, because there were 300 people in the room there to learn React. And this was right when React open sourced. So I got very lucky. Like, I finally picked a technology that actually went big and went a while. I don't always do that. In fact, at the beginning of my career, I was convinced that Flash would kill HTML. Hasn't happened yet. Steve Jobs changed my career in a big way. But ultimately, you cannot change just one thing. And as a side note, what I've found from deciding to go big on public speaking to try to get good at it, it has rippled throughout my life. Like, I feel more confident everywhere because of that. And in particular, as an independent, I often have conversations with people in leadership positions. That used to be something that intimidated me, but something that's interesting is once you've gotten comfortable standing up in front of a bunch of developers and trying to talk tech, those sorts of conversations feel a lot lower stakes, because trust me, this is way more intimidating because anybody in here could say, you're wrong, you had that syntax wrong, you're actually holding it incorrectly, whatever it may be. So the butterfly effect, the ripple effects of many of these decisions are really interesting because you can't change only one thing. Years ago, I had an opportunity to get a job at Microsoft, and I got the offer, and this was my dream for many, many years. And I realized, strangely, that I had to say no to it because I knew that my ultimate dream was to be independent. So I ended up passing on this offer, and I've often wondered, was this a mistake? What would my life be like now? I have friends that are there that have moved way up in the organization now, and they get to tell their parents that they've got this really impressive title at a really impressive company. Nobody's heard of my company because it's just me. So there's trades there. Like, I chose to go independent, and I wanted to go independent because, like, I love freedom. I love the dynamic nature of being independent. I like having the ability to basically get up each day and focus on what I want and say yes to the things that I want. I love helping lots of different companies, but man, there are a lot of downsides to being independent. You really have to be comfortable with this roller coaster effect that one day you wake up and you just landed 3 clients and now you're overwhelmed with work, and then other days you get up and you go, I've got to figure out how to fill the funnel. This is stressful, like going through a slow time. You have, in some ways, more bosses. You have many more people to answer to. And it's also just lonely. Like, the reason I'm at conferences is because I don't have a team. Like, I miss working on a team. I work with other teams, but I'm not part of their team. So there's not the same level of camaraderie. I'm this other guy that's kind of on the side for a little while. So this idea of the first law of ecology, we have to remember that everything's interconnected. So let me pivot into software for a second and talk about this. There's this idea called Shipley's 6 dimensions. When we write software, we have to remember that these 6 dimensions all fight. They all pull and tug at one another. And you can think about this. Imagine that I told you that I want you to focus on speed of execution. I want your code to run as fast as it possibly can. Well, when you do this, the time spent coding, do you think that's going to go up? Probably so, because you're going to need extra time to improve speed of execution. How about the brevity of your code? Will it go up? Well, no, it'll probably go down. You'll probably have to write maybe more code to find a way to make this even faster. Maybe you're going to need to cache. And now we add in a caching layer. It's not as brevity, but it does have some benefits. So we have to think about this all the time, that as software developers, yes, we're paid to deliver a solution, but your boss isn't necessarily saying anything about these trade-offs. This is where we're professionals. I have to decide at what point is it fast enough, secure enough, accessible enough, and so on. Like, quality is my job. There's a shorter way to think about this, the old iron triangle, where you can have it good, fast, and cheap, but what's the punchline? Pick 2. You have to pick 2. And this comes up all the time. So these are stories of trade-offs. And there's lots of other examples. The risk, though, with software in general is a myopic focus. You'll hear people that say you should always have 100% test coverage. Context matters. That can be useful. Or people that fixate on having an absolutely clean Git history. We have to, like, a clean Git history can be useful, but why? How often are we leveraging it? Is it really that important? Is this the hill I want to die on? Lots of examples. Or types are another example. Like, I do a lot of work in TypeScript, and I have to ask myself, okay, are there times where the amount of work we're putting in to try to make this fully type-safe worth it? Should we maybe consider being a little more lenient in places? And also, although I'm a big fan of it, lots of downsides. So one thing that's really useful, so we're here at a PHP conference, I can only imagine that anybody in here that's worked in PHP for long could also say, there's a couple things about PHP that are not ideal, that annoy me, that I wish I could change, and that is a sign of being a professional. And it's also a sign, frankly, of not being too religious about your technology. You should be able to dunk on the thing that you use every day because you know nothing out here is perfect. It's all trade-offs. And the more languages you learn, the more you feel that way. Another idea here is the idea of specialization. Specialization is a trade-off. I believe in the power of specialization because the story of the last 7 years of my career is about that very thing. So If you rewind in my past, I started out, like in college, I learned strangely COBOL and C++ and VB. And then I went on, and in my professional career, it was Flash and Cold Fusion and PHP. I haven't written PHP since the days of CodeIgniter, so this dates me a lot. I went from PHP to Java and .NET, and then tons of JavaScript over the last many years. So I have specialized, which gave me some benefits. In fact, when I quit my full-time job 7 years ago, I was able to do that because I had made a name for myself in just one tech, which was React. Now, I know lots of stuff, but I just decided, what do I want to go big on? And that was my focus. And this gave me lots of benefits, but it's also downsides. It's higher risk, because I'll tell you right now, as a React specialist, I'm in a lot less demand than I was 10 years ago when nobody knew what the heck it was and everybody was eager to try to figure out how to do it right. So I still do have work, but I'm not as popular as I was, and I recognize that I need to potentially pivot to branding differently. Now, this idea of the trade-off here is interesting because there are 2 books here on the screen. The one on the left, I have recommended the book Essentialism to people more than any other book. And I love the book because you can summarize it in just one sentence, which is, stop asking, how can I do it all? And start asking, what do I want to go big on? And I would encourage any of you that have been coding for more than, say, 5 years, you should be asking yourself now, maybe not here at 5 years, but probably in the next few, what do I want to go big on? I've gotten to taste a lot of things. I've done databases and server administration, and I've worked with lots of cloud providers and multiple languages. What was the thing that I felt like is not just something that I am interested in, but that I could be world-class in? And so that's what I did with React, and that worked out really well for me. But I also want to point out the trade-off here, because the book Range is effectively an argument against the book on the left. Range says, hey, you want to have a huge variety of experiences, and lots of different experiences makes you more useful to people. That is also true. So you'll hear people talk about the T-shaped developer, which is effectively saying, yes, you have a lot of breadth, but also you have depth in maybe 1 or 2 little areas. So my suggestion is, think about early in your career like tasting ice cream. You're just going out there and you're trying a bunch of different flavors, and you're going, okay, what is the thing that I really enjoy? The other thing I would recommend to anybody is look around and chase your opportunity to be useful. So the reason that I went into JavaScript is not because I think JavaScript is that great. In fact, I could see very clearly that JavaScript was inferior to C# and Java, which I was working in day to day. I really missed types, for instance. I missed being able to lean on the compiler and those sorts of things. But I was in a situation where nobody on my team wanted to write it, and I went, I can write it, and I can get pretty good at it. And I realized at some point I might as well just get really good at it, and now I'm filling a gap that nobody else wants to, and I can become world class, at least in my company, at this thing that everybody else is complaining about. And that really worked out well for me. So pursuing that opportunity to be useful. So another example of trade-offs is security. If you take security too far, you effectively have a team whose job is to make sure that nobody can accomplish anything that they need to get done. That is a real risk. And I'm sure you guys have worked in companies like that, where you go, I saw an extreme example. I was teaching a group of front-end developers that happened to be associated with the US Air Force. And I said, okay, just npm install, gave them this package name. And then I see them just waiting around and waiting around. When they run that command, it automatically pops up a prompt, and they have to fill out a bunch of paperwork to request permission from somebody to be able to install a single package. They have to do that every single time. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, like that is a level of security that is remarkable and useless. Because I can guarantee you the person on the other side is not reading all the code in that npm package and trying to figure out whether it's truly secure. If they were that sharp, they wouldn't be in that job. Like, how brutal would that job be? Another example, monorepos. I like monorepos and I hate monorepos. They are a heck of a trade-off. And this is why you see people that feel so strongly about the pattern. It's really helpful. You know, I was talking to my wife about this last night. Like at dinner, I love having conversations at speaker dinners about all sorts of divisive topics. Like, we'll talk about religion, we'll talk about politics, we'll talk about tabs versus spaces, you name it. Like, things get sketchy. And I love doing that because I want to understand other people's perspectives. And I want to be able to steel man someone else's argument. I want to be able to truly understand why they came to that. And there's a sort of related idea here from Paul Graham that I would recommend to anyone. I've emphasized this to my kids, is to try to keep your identity small. And by that I mean avoid picking a political party and saying, that's my party, because then they are effectively choosing your ideas, but also avoid labeling yourself as a PHP developer. Like PHP might be the technology that you use today, but it is just the tech. What you ultimately are is a software developer. You are ultimately a technologist that can pivot between all these things. Okay, so that was the first law. The others we're going to boogie through a little bit faster. Second law is the fundamental theorem of software engineering, which says that we can solve any problem by introducing another level of indirection. So in other words, when you got a problem, just add another layer of abstraction. And this, as you can imagine, well, it can go too far. Back when I learned design patterns, I remember reading the Gang of Four book, and then later Kathy Sierra has a book, Head First Design Patterns, which I found pretty useful. The risk with any of these things is it becomes a hammer that you're just trying to use anywhere. Design patterns are useful, but we shouldn't be trying to shoehorn them into the code. And the thing is, these all solve problems via indirection. So Kevlin Henney makes a great point, is that all problems can be solved in computer science with another level of abstraction, except for the problem of too many abstractions. You've probably looked at code like this before, where you start jumping from file to file to file to function to function to function, and at some point you realize you can't hold it all in your head. And even though it might be broken up into little pieces, there are so many different moving pieces that you get vertigo looking at it. That's the risk of too many levels of indirection. And I've actually worked with people that I would characterize as over-abstractors. Some people would call them an architecture astronaut. One example of that was when I suggested years ago, we were working in Angular 1, right when the first Angular came out, and we were going to pivot over to React. And somebody I was working with said, well, what we should do is just abstract away React. We'll create our own abstraction around that, give it a good name, and then if we ever need to pivot back to Angular or to some other JavaScript library, we can just do that. What in the world are you talking about? How do you abstract away something that doesn't exist? What would that API look like? It's like, imagine that we were going to create a data access layer for a new paradigm of database that doesn't exist yet. Well, what API would I need to interact with it? We don't know. That's over-abstraction. Often we're solving a problem that might feel interesting and be hard technically, but that doesn't mean that it's useful. Now, you can, of course, make the mistake on the other side, and I'm sure you've worked with people who are under-abstractors, who will copy and paste and write run-on methods. I was certainly guilty of this early in my career, but I have also gone too far the other way. I've worked with people who write single-line functions, where you write a function, and it's one line, and now you're naming the function, so you're jumping between so many different calls that that becomes a problem. So there's a balance in here. You've heard of dry, I'm sure. Don't repeat yourself. This is generally useful advice, but boy, when you implement dry, there are downsides to it. You do end up with more moving pieces. You can't read it top down like a book anymore. It reduces locality of behavior. I really like this term. Think about, ideally, when I have a piece of code, that line of code is related to other things around it. That makes it a little easier to understand. If that piece of code instead is off in some separate folder, it infers that it's not so related. It's now physically in a different spot. Okay, let's talk about the next law. This law actually comes up the most for me as an independent, is Conway's law, which says that organization structure affects system structure. Everybody in here probably works on a team, and the way that your team is structured is strategic. It's set up in a certain way to make you successful. Now, what I find interesting is there are companies whose organizational structures are actually the whole reason that they talk to me. And I had an example of this where I have a client who has people in Egypt and people in Argentina. Now think about the globe. Think about how many time zones exist between Egypt and Argentina. And what they had was a situation where Egypt and Argentina were supposed to be collaborating every day, but the problem is the people in Egypt are ready to call it a night when the people in Argentina are just getting started. So they would have a 15-minute stand-up each day and try to do all the collaboration and resolution. And the problem is, the moment they'd get off the call, they'd realize, oh, crud, no, there's some other things. The code that they did last night isn't really working, but they're actually not online anymore. They're off enjoying time with their family. They had an organizational structure problem. It is a real issue. And the thing is, the communication structure is ultimately going to dictate your system structure. So an example of this, I worked for a company called Cox Automotive. And Cox Automotive is this big automotive conglomerate. They own Kelley Blue Book and Auto Trader, lots of other companies. So when I was there, I was a principal engineer, and one of my jobs was to basically level everybody up, try to make us all faster. And we had an application that was a monolith. And when I say monolith, it was dozens and dozens of developers that had built this app up over years. What we did was what's called a reverse Conway maneuver. So remember, organizational structure impacts your software's structure itself. We had one giant team, and we were too big. So what did we do? We said, okay, 5 people here, 5 people here, 5 people here. We're going to have a bunch of separate delivery teams, and you get this tab, you get this tab, you get this tab. And now every team lead, their job is to go into the code and try to rip out their parts and put it in their own area so that it's clear who owns what. So now the organizational structure and the code structure are matching. So we had one org. If we're going to have multiple orgs, we don't just change the organization, we also change the code. So I say all this just to ask yourself, do you really think that right now you are just happen to be in the perfect organizational structure for the software that you want to write? Probably not. So it's a question to ask. So the reverse Conway maneuver that I was just talking about is basically splitting a team to split a monolith. Or maybe the alternative, maybe you all have decided, you know what? We went heavy on microservices and it really wasn't necessary. Maybe we'd be better off just moving toward a monolith. Well, in that case, you take the microservice teams, you glue them together with your into one delivery team, and what you'll find is really quickly all the code will start to gel together, probably in one repository. It's just going to feel natural. So that's Conway's law. Next law, McLuhan's law, which says that we shape our tools and then our tools tend to shape us. This comes up all over the place in life. If you give me a monolith, I'm going to have one large team. If you give me static types, I find that I think in types. If I start writing automated tests, then I find that the act of using an automated testing tool makes me think in terms of edge cases. I start thinking about always and nevers and huge arrays and empty lists and really long strings and passing in invalid parameters. Another example of this is my home office. So this is my office, and on the left-hand side, you can see that my desk is powered down, and I've got a seat sitting there. And then on the right-hand side, I have my desk in the vertical position. It's just a powered desk. I hit a button. Now, I have a treadmill desk. So the fact that I have that tool sitting there in front of my laptop means that the easiest thing for me to do is to just get on in and walk. And at the end of the day, I very strategically put the desk up. Because what you want is for the easy thing to be the thing that you do. So make the thing that you want to do easy. So me in the morning, if I walk in and the desk is up, it's very obvious. The easiest thing for me to do is just stand on the treadmill and just start walking, which is a good way to start the day. So this is my tools shaping my behavior. You can ask yourself, are the tools that you have right now, is the environment that you have right now shaping it? And in fact, I'm going to close out the talk with another reference to this. We're going to talk about a really divisive topic, which is multiple monitors. So buckle up. Goodhart's law. Goodhart's law, this one comes up all the time. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Who can think of an example of this problem in action? Test coverage, yes. When somebody says 100% test coverage, you'll get there. You'll find a way to get there. It doesn't mean that you'll necessarily have much better tests, but you will get the system to say 100. Yes. Standardized testing in schools, yes, yes. So teachers are out there just making sure we're going to hit these numbers, whatever it takes. So I'm going to teach to the test, and that doesn't necessarily produce the best outcomes in life, but it will get us good grades. What other examples? Yeah. Yes, time to respond, time to close. Other examples in here, I was a manager for about a year, and I was miserable for that year. My wife can attest to it. During that year, One thing I struggled with was how to measure the effectiveness of my developers. So I paid attention to things like number of commits, number of pull requests, number of tickets closed. Is that a fair way to evaluate people? That's a trick question. It is and it isn't. It is a part of the story. If you hired me as a developer and I closed no tickets all year, yeah, that's a definite piece of signal. I should have at least done one ticket, right? So this is the problem. When we start fixating on these numbers, if I tell my team that I'm going to measure them based on the number of tickets closed, and I make that really clear each day, what do you think they're going to start doing? All right, we're going to break all these tickets down as granular as we possibly can. I'm going to start opening tickets and saying I found a bug and it's not even really a bug. Maybe I'll write a bug so I can fix the bug, and I can do that in a couple minutes. Like, humans will optimize for what they're told to optimize. They got kids to feed, bills to pay. Hours in office. I had a boss who very clearly cared about hours in office. I was in the office. I would leave my house at 6 in the morning. I was always there by 7. I would always be there as long as he was. I didn't want to leave before he did because I really respected him and I wanted him to see that I was working hard. And that worked out well for my career at that point, but that didn't mean I was actually more productive. That was just me playing the game he wanted me to play. So is that actually better? Now, I want to point out, there is nothing fundamentally wrong with these metrics. There is signal here. In fact, I worked with somebody who had a full-time developer job, full-time, and he only shipped 3 pull requests in an entire year. And you know why that was? He actually had a business on the side, and we only found that out later. But I pointed out to somebody, I said, every time I message him, he doesn't reply. And we started looking into it more and found out, well, yeah, he hasn't even been really on the machine much. He's just phoning it in. He occasionally comes to meetings. So number of tickets closed, that actually was a lot of signal here. Here's how to play these. Remember, if we go back, this law says when a measure becomes a target, it becomes a problem. If you tell your team that they need to hit 40 story points, now it's become a target. That's a real problem. What will people do? They'll size their tickets in such a way that they can make sure they hit 40 story points. So the risk here is the fixation on hitting the number. So my take is, if I were in leadership, I would quietly monitor these things because this is signal, but I wouldn't tell anybody that I was doing so. I wouldn't tell anybody that I'm tracking the number of hours that you're in the office, but every boss is kind of paying attention to that. If you happen to be in the office, they're going to notice if you're never there. They're going to notice if you're the last one at every meeting or you're missing half the time. So measuring developer productivity has this risk because ultimately people will game the system. They'll find ways to get the results that you say are so important. So Bill Gates had said that measuring programming progress by lines of code is like measuring aircraft building progress by weight. Imagine, yeah, I want you every day writing as many lines of code as possible. Well, that's not great either. Now you're just incentivized to bloviate, to reinvent, to go copy and paste. We don't want that either. So all metrics can lead to poor behavior. So the thing with all of this is fixation on these hard numbers can reduce quality. Now, I was just talking about software, but I want to emphasize, like, this same idea comes to mind all the time for me in my personal life. For me, I have fixated heavily on some of these things that are easy to measure. I cared very deeply about what my salary was when I had a full-time job. And I focused on my net worth. I would check it every day. And there are benefits to that because I can tell you the nature of humanity is what you measure, you manage. So if you in here right now don't know what your net worth is, I would encourage you, go ahead and track it, but do not make it your entire personality because that would be sad. My kids, my boys are lifting weights and they are tracking their bench press over time, tracking their squats, and seeing that number go up, man, like that is super motivating. So there is value in this, but the real risk of these are easy to measure, but if you fixate on them, it might reduce the quality of your life. Like, think about, like, there is no net worth that is worth losing your loved ones. Like, being alone and wealthy is a brutal place to be. So this is where I'm going to coin my own law in here. Since my last name is House, we're going to call it House's Law. So the law is the things most worth measuring are the hardest to measure. So what are the things that are most worth measuring that are hard to measure? Well, it's things like, is Is the developer on your team reliable? Do they have a positive attitude? Are they a team player? Is it somebody with a growth mindset that's willing to say, I don't know how to do this, but I can do it? And hopefully they write readable code and they're humble enough to say, I don't know. I have interviewed, I don't even know how many developers, and I would encourage you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with saying, I don't know in an interview. That is actually a good signal to me that you are willing to be honest with me when you're not sure. Follow it up with this, a genuine, curious question. What is it? I want to know. Like, if you really mean it, that comes across wonderfully, because now you've shown humility and you've shown interest in growth. Now you're somebody that I really do want to bring on the team. Now, all of these, though, you notice this? If you're a manager, man, like all of this is hard to measure. How do you put this in a spreadsheet? Same story on personal success. If you're thinking about personal success, it's about how are my relationships? Am I growing every day? Am I contributing to society? Do people trust me? Do I have autonomy? And ultimately, I mean, obviously, am I happy? I really like, Warren Buffett says that his definition of success is that the people that he wants to love him, love him. I think that's pretty hard to argue with. Like, you could have everything else, but if your loved ones don't love you, that's a sad place to be. But all of these are hard to measure, but they're better quality indicators than those hard numbers. So that is House's law. Ask yourself, what things are hard to measure that I should probably be paying more attention to? And I mean, on this note too, I'm not over here saying that measurement's bad either, but I am saying avoid solely fixating on those hard numbers. And if you're going to measure anything of teams, try to avoid telling them that you're measuring it so that they can't game it. I absolutely would pay attention to how many tickets people are closing over time, to how much they're helping others, to number of pull requests and so on, but I certainly wouldn't tell anybody that I'm paying attention to it. It's just a little piece of signal. Sort of the same way that I wouldn't tell anybody that I'm paying attention to whether they brush their teeth, but at some point I will notice. I mean, you don't have to tell them. Okay, next law, Hick's law. Hick's law says the more options a user has, the longer it takes them to make a decision. So this is a quick one. Like, you can see this. This user interface is bad because it is overwhelming. The number of things that I have to do here. And you think about how Google went the other way and just said, what if we just have an input? And then they fought and they fought and they fought and they kept. We're not going to go the Yahoo route and have all these different links and sections. No, we're just going to have an input box. So there's lots of ways to say this sort of thing. You'll hear people say less is more, and more features, remember, they create more decisions. So I would encourage you. There is a wonderful short video out on TED called The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. He actually wrote the book Paradox of Choice. But the point of the talk and the point of the larger book is that you would think that more options make us happier, but they actually make us miserable. And this is part of why marriage, for instance, is so powerful, because you've got this moment in time where you finally said, like, there are infinite options out there for anybody. But at some point you said, you know what, I'm going to commit to this one person, and it is a hard decision. But once you've done that, you actually find yourself happier because you're indexing on that one relationship instead of constantly going, oh, maybe I could find somebody taller or stronger or more handsome or with better hair, whatever it may be. I don't know why I said the better hair part, but yeah. My wife's over here, so I had to throw that joke in. She knows. So years ago, Steve Jobs came back to Apple, and Apple had all these different models. It was inscrutable. They had tons of different SKUs. And he walks up to the chalkboard and he drew this. What if we just had consumer and pro, and we just had laptop and desktop? Let's simplify all of this. Because what he could tell was the reason people weren't buying Apple is they couldn't figure out how the heck to choose between all these things. And I've got to say, as a side note, I've got to wonder if Steve was still alive, would we have so many SKUs? It has slowly slid again. Why do we need this many colors of laptops and phones? All of those are SKUs that they have to store. It's just, I don't think it makes sense. I feel like Steve wouldn't have allowed it. Got to wonder. Okay, we're getting toward the end here. I am actually going to breeze past some of these because, again, we got like 5 minutes. I will say Cunningham's law is very useful, though. In short, if you want to get the right answer on the internet, post the wrong one. That's it. And I do this all the time, not deliberately. What I do is I post my experience and I say, I found this really useful. This library is great. And then somebody goes, hey, idiot, this is better. I go, oh, okay. You didn't have to call me an idiot, but thanks. I did this recently for a client. We improved their CI build. We went from 12 minutes to 3 minutes, and I posted what I did. Well, then in response, all these other people came in and said, yeah, that's useful, but think about this, think about this, think about this. Like, super handy. Another law, quickly, the law of diminishing returns. You have to think about the point when the benefits gained are less than the amount that you invested. I love cars, but there's a reason that I don't drive a Bugatti. Okay, there's multiple reasons as I think about it more, but one of them is that this is way past the point of diminishing returns. I could have a lot of fun in a manual Miata. Just put the top down. It's more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow. So this looks really awesome and it gets attention, but it's so far past the point of diminishing returns. And this happens in your career too. Like, the more you put into your career, the more you'll get out of it. But my wife would attest, like, I hit the point of, okay, you need to chill out. Like, you are working constantly. And yeah, your career is great, but there is more to life than being at a keyboard every moment. Look for diminishing returns. And this is even true just in your own technical abilities. Like, yes, you can keep getting good at this one thing, but maybe it's time to level off a little and be a little more well-rounded. Okay, so we got just 4 minutes left. I want to wrap up just with an exercise. Let's put these laws to use that we just talked about. So these are the laws. I'm going to share a link to the slides at the end so you can take a QR code, but these are the laws that we talked about today. And I would encourage you to look at this again. This is the sort of thing you could even print out and put near your computer just as a reminder of trade-offs in software. These are timeless principles. So let's talk about automated testing for a second. So this is a way for us to put these ideas to use. There are a number of related laws in automated testing. First, the first law of ecology. You can never change one thing. When you start writing automated tests, other things are going to happen. Likely you're going to have improved quality, but also you're going to find you're going to have to invest a little more time up front to get more velocity later. Our tools shape us. When I'm writing those tests, I find that they change the way I think about the code. The Bennett principle, which I didn't get to talk about, which says that we invest more in energy, we get more value. When you're on vacation, if you just sit there the whole time, you're not going to get as much value as if you're actually up and interacting with your family. If you just sit there and stare at the clouds, it's not very useful. Law of diminishing returns. At some point, the cost outweighs the benefit. So 100% test coverage may make sense for you, or maybe just somewhere in the ballpark of 80-ish is sufficient. Think about those diminishing returns. As a side note, when I join teams and I ask, tell me about your testing strategy, the response is often, yeah, it ain't great. It is surprising to me how often people say testing is important, but they don't actually do it. They're way too busy. It's frustrating. So it is a trade-off, though. Okay, I want to just briefly, though, I'm going to breeze past this because I want to get to the most important point of the day. We got to talk multiple monitors, guys. This is an intervention of sorts. You can never change one thing. When you add more monitors, what is happening? Hicks' law, more options means it takes longer to make a decision. If you give me 6 monitors, I now have more options for where to put things. I'm now managing windows and moving them around. McLuhan's law says that our tools shape us. If you give me more things to look at once, am I going to be more focused or more distracted? Diminishing returns, there's a point when the cost exceeds the value added. See, I could put on a headset and I could have an endless number of virtual monitors and move my head all around and see those. In fact, I could sit in a room like this and maybe I'd be just hyper effective and I would just be the most badass programmer in the world with this. I don't know though. This seems way past the point of diminishing returns. I'm not sure this is useful. As a developer, what do I do all day? I do 3 things. I read, I write, and I think. So ask yourself, does this look like a good way to read, write, and think? This is me simulating 4 monitors. And yes, I used to have 3 on my desk, but then I'd often have some iPad or a phone also propped up to give me a little more signal at once. The problem is seeing all this at once makes it hard to read, write, and think. At least it does for me. So these are my unpopular opinions. I'm just sharing what I have found. When I'm reading, I don't want to see anything else. If you give me a book, I don't even want my phone with me because I'll be tempted to also have my phone open and I'll find myself scrolling social when I mean to read the book. When I'm writing, I don't want to see anything else. I just want a full screen that's white. And when I'm thinking, I don't even want to be at the machine at all. Typically, I just want to get away from it. So when I'm coding, this is what my screen looks like. I hide all Chrome in my OS. I'm on Mac, but you can hide the top bar, you can hide the launch down below, you can hide all the Chrome in your editor. Just show me line numbers and code. When I'm writing, or I'm sorry, when I'm reading, this is what I want. Again, I hide all tabs in Chrome. All I see is content so that I can focus. And then when I'm thinking, well, I want to go to the gym or go on a walk, just walk around the house, that is useful. There's a wonderful book on this topic called Deep Work by a guy named Cal Newport. I would highly recommend it. If your office looks like this, does that really look like a place to do reading, writing, and thinking? I'm not a fan of open floor plans. So multiple monitors, well, yeah, you can see many things at once. You can switch focus quickly. It does improve your image. Everybody thinks, man, he's getting a lot done. Look at all those monitors. But it makes it harder for me, at least, to consistently read, write, and think in some cases. So more distractions, more window management, more cursor movement, more friction when I travel. Like when I go to a coffee shop, now I don't have my 3 monitors. I got to deal with just this one. If I take a screenshot, I might screenshot the wrong window. Where the heck did my cursor go? All sorts of things like that. Okay, so let's summarize. At the beginning of the talk, I talked about 6 different dimensions of software, Shipley's 6. These all fight against one another as trade-offs. These are the laws of software and life, and I want to emphasize, you saw this, like all of these laws don't just apply to software, they're life advice as well, like things to keep in mind. Only a Sith speaks in absolutes. Avoid always and never. And for exceptional results, I would encourage you, consider for a while to embrace weird. I have been exceedingly weird. My wife would attest to it. There have been times that I have taken laptops places that people wouldn't normally take them just so I could get work done. And that has benefited me and cost me in various ways. It is a trade-off. So the slides are at this QR code. You can find me on social at HouseCore. I'd love to work with you. I also have a consulting company, do a lot of front-end development. These days I'm helping a lot of companies embrace AI and move faster with coding via LLMs, so be happy to help you there too. I'm from Kansas City. If you're ever wanting another conference, in Kansas City there's a conference called KCDC. It's about 2,000 developers. It is multi-track, so you name the tech, it's there. I'd love to see you all there. We could go have barbecue and hang out. I hope this was helpful, and thank you all for having me. This was fun.